Your money can be robbed, you can be cheated out of your capital, your wealth, but education is something that stays through your life. Without hard work, without your sincere hours of studies, you could not have got into IIT. But luck plays a role.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Learning from Leaders series. I'm joined, like always, by Peter Van Am, the author of Before I Was a CEO. And today, we have the immense privilege to welcome Mr. S.P. Shukla, the Group President at Mahindra Group. I'm sure it will be an interesting talk. Peter, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Luc. It's so excited to be back with you already today. And on this very special day, of course, we're starting for those from the US, the Thanksgiving holidays. And we've got a wonderful guest today. It is indeed SP Shukla. SP, who is a group president at Mahindra. Mahindra, one of the largest companies of India, of course, many subsidiaries all around the world, huge company. And we're so fortunate to welcome you here, SP. Thank you for being with us. We're going to talk about, your career. We're going to talk about your company, of course. But first, as always, I should start by asking, how are you? Because, of course, also in India, I suppose, the COVID pandemic is still raging.
Good afternoon, Peter, and good evening from India. As you know, time difference is a little late here. I'm fine. Thank you so much for asking. As fine as one can be under the circumstances. I'm at home. We still have work from home, especially for people who are 60 plus. So company has allowed me the privilege of operating from home. So it has allowed for many of our colleagues. Bombay is in a bit of a difficulty for last several months, not as bad as Spain or Italy, but still bad in its own way. Fortunately, COVID has been coming down for last 3 months. We are looking forward to the vaccine coming soon.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. We're all looking forward to that moment. In the meanwhile, of course, many of us, as you and me, are working from home. Tell us a little bit about Mahindra. Tell us about, the size of the company. Tell us about the operations of the company. And then also, is everyone working from home? Is everybody working in the offices? What is the situation for Mahindra?
It's a large group, as you know. We have nearly 250,000 employees, 240,000 all over the world. About $20 billion in revenue and market cap. It depends upon the industry you are in. So some of our businesses are service industries. For example, IT, financial services. These businesses we operate mostly from home today. Very small percentage of employees, only 15 or 20% need to go to office. And we have put a system, a roster kind of a thing. So they come once a week. Somebody else comes on Monday, somebody comes on Tuesday. So every day only 1 out of 6 or 1 out of 7 people are there, which ensures sufficient space between the employees. As far as manufacturing companies are concerned, and we are the largest tractor company in the world. We are among the topmost companies in automotive. We make motorcycles, we make armored vehicles, light tanks. Now, these companies have no choice but to operate. So when many people do work from home, which is a buzzword today, there are many others who are actually working to make that happen. We get our bread, we get our butter, we get jam, we get food items. That's because somebody in the factory actually working. Work from home is happening in services, in civil services, in education, but elsewhere we are working. So I would say that nearly half of our people in manufacturing companies, they are operating. So we have taken due precautions to safeguard them.
Yeah. Huge numbers. You mentioned almost 250,000 employees. And I assume that most of them, or at least the majority of them, are in India, and that many of them work, of course, in the IT department, the IT company of Mahindra, huge company in its own right. And you said most of them are working from home. Is that possible? Is that feasible for so many people to work from home?
Yes, in fact, I have been surprised myself, but yes, our IT infrastructure has stood up well. I will not take credit for it, but I can mention that I did spend 16 years in telecom and IT industry. In fact, the first two companies which launched data on mobile phones
Wow.
were actually, you will see somewhere on Google my photograph holding that 15, 20 years ago, not 25 years ago. We have put up a quite an enviable infrastructure in India. So people have been able to operate from home without much difficulty.
Yeah, so that's an incredible story, isn't it? Because, of course, the IT infrastructure has been built up in all countries around the world. Most of us, the students also of EU, are used by now to broadband internet, to 4G, and now some of them are lucky enough to live in places where there's 5G. But you said you've actually worked on the development of building that infrastructure, that IT infrastructure in India. So that's a part of your career. I want to ask you more about that, SP, but perhaps we should start at the beginning of your story, because where are you actually from and how did you grow to become, of course, to get the career that you have today?
Where do I begin? I come from a small town, about 60, 70 kilometers from Delhi, which is India's capital. Small town meaning really small town. We had a number of cars in the town was in single digits. I think there were 8 or 9 cars in the whole town, and we knew whom the car belonged to. We could recognize. 4 cars were government cars, the chief of the police, the chief of the civil service, and the chief medical officer of the only hospital. And other 5 were private owned, and we knew who owned them. We knew them by colors. Now, from
That's
that
a real
small
village.
town, yes. At that time, honestly, I had not thought that one day I will be mentioning that town to you. I would not have thought anybody knows that town also. Education made all the difference. And I always tell everybody, whosoever cares to listen, try to get the best education possible. There is no bigger asset in life than your education. Your money can be robbed. You can be cheated out of your capital, your wealth, but education is something that stays through your lifelong.
Yeah, and I think that most of us will agree to that. We're of course all studying. This is why we're here, and we're also here to learn from you. But SP, I mean, I look at your resume. Yes, great education. As a matter of fact, the best education. You went to the Indian Institute of Management and the Indian Institute of Technology. Those are like the Harvard and the MIT of India. Now, many people want to go there, but few people actually get to go there. What was your secret? How did you get in from that small village?
There was no secret really. You have no choice but to work hard and put in a lot of hours in studies. On that, there is no doubt. But there is something which I will be honest to admit. Not many people admit that. They want to take credit to themselves. Many things happen as a matter of coincidence also. You know, my small town was in a small state of India. We had one engineering college, quite reputed, good college. And generally, we all thought that we will go to that college. It is like in US, you are in a particular state and you want to go to the engineering college in your own state, which is not far from your house. Please remember, air travel was not very affordable in those days. So you had to travel by road or by train.
Right.
One of my classmates, I still remember his name, Sharma, he by chance got 2 application forms for Indian Institute of Technology, IIT, because he asked his father and his brother who were outside in a big city to send, and both of them sent him. Now he had one spare form and he did not want to waste 1 rupee. 1 rupee was equal of something like 10 cents perhaps in those days. So he came and told me that you should fill in the form. I said, but that IIT is far away. I'm sure I will get into the neighboring engineering college. I'll be closer home. And he insisted that fill in the form, whether you go or don't go is your choice. I filled in the form, put in some effort. I got through. And once I got through, a number of people who started telling me, what are you thinking? You should go there, go to the IIT. Why are you thinking of the engineering college nearby? So sometimes coincidences play an important role, but they go only that far.
Right.
Without hard work, without your sincere hours of studies, you could not have got into IIT. But luck plays a role. I might not have filled the form at all.
Yeah, I like that story that it's sort of the person that didn't want to waste one rupee actually may have led to a fantastic career, or may have helped you get a fantastic career. Made that
And
one
I know
row
his
very
name
far.
after 50 years.
Yeah, we're still here. And you know what I thought was interesting also is that you graduated from engineering, from management afterwards, and got your first job at what many people consider normal or a good job out of college, which is a management traineeship. Now you get this job at Dunlop, which we know, of course, from the tires. And you stayed there for many years and built a lot of successes. But how could you do that when at the time, this is the early 1980s, India was still sort of considered by Britain as part of the Commonwealth, still is today, of course. And I suppose many of the people in that company, a British company, were still Brits. How did you manage to build a career as an Indian in that British multinational?
That was 1981 when I joined Dunlop. Yes, you're right. It was very British still at that time. It was a subsidiary of Dunlop UK, which was the largest tire company in the world in those days. In India, Dunlop was larger than most of its customers. At that time, they were recruiting good people. I presume I was one of those good people. And everybody worked hard, like you do in corporate sector. I personally believe sometimes one or two events happen which can propel you, which can pull you up in limelight. Now, that is an opportunity you have to make the best use of. Once a month, I used to go to factory, which was about 50 kilometers away from our head office. So once I was returning and it was raining very badly, I was waiting that if someone is going back from the factory to home or anywhere, I will get a lift. You can hitchhike a ride to go up to the railway station,
Sure.
and then you take a train. I was standing near the gate of the factory, the largest tire factory in the world, in Asia at that time. And I was able to flag down a car, and it happened to be the managing director's car. An Englishman, very fine gentleman. He stopped and asked me, "Young man, where do you want to go?" And I told him I was only looking for a drop to the railway station. He said, "Hop in. Why do you want to go to railway station? I'm going back to Calcutta. You come with me." Well, it was a 1 hour ride. And in that 1 hour, we got talking. He got interested. And then he asked me, if one thing you wanted to happen, which you are not able to get it done because of the hierarchy, bureaucracy, what is it you will want to do? I gave him the example of introducing nylon tires for motorcycles, scooters, three-wheelers, and told him that they are very important, because if we do not have best quality nylon tires for two-wheelers, many of the government employees use them, and they are decision maker for your more expensive tires, the truck tires, the earth-moving machinery tires. Very often people spend money for the high-end products and they neglect the lower-end, low-cost products. But both affect each other because both carry the same brand. He understood. In next 2 days, we got approval, capital expenditure approval for spending money for nylon two-wheeler tires. Later on, I introduced radial tires for cars. First time, I got opportunity to do many new things. You know, the word spreads that this gentleman is able to get approval for his projects.
Yeah.
And then one positive thing links to another positive thing. I did not know a word at that time, which I discovered few years ago. I heard a new word called elevator pitch.
That's right.
If you get few minutes with somebody who is an important decision maker, I will suggest to younger friends who are in the audience, start with the most important thing, then second most important thing, then the third most important thing. So that if you get cut short, if the time is short, you have not spent your important 2 minutes or 5 minutes on some inconsequential things and missed out. Prioritize your conversation if you are talking to someone who can be
Right.
influencer or decision maker. This was my learning. I did not know the word then. Now I know the word elevator pitch. That put me off to a good start and never looked back.
It's incredible. I mean, you call it now the elevator pitch, but in reality for you, it was the car ride pitch. And
You're right.
and you took that opportunity, you gave a really good argument, made a really good pitch and got approval for it. And then you went from strength to strength. I mean, you really helped to build out the company, to go upscale, let's say, and you grew together with the company and with the country, because in the next 15 years or so was really the start of that high growth era of India. Now, when that is all happening and all is going well, you know, then why don't you stay your entire career at that company at Dunlop? Because after 15 years, you said, I think it's time to go. I'm going to go to the telecom industry. I go to what is now Vodafone, SR at the time.
You know, you get sometimes your early career influences you. I got to do so many new things in Dunlop, launching everything for the first time, from rayon to nylon, from nylon to radial, from radial to steel radials, changing retail outlets, creating showrooms when earlier there were shops like petrol pumps. It became more of the same after some time. Not some time, we are talking about more than a decade. And that is when a new industry was about to be born. And as I said, tire to telecom. This new industry was mobile.
Of course.
That caught my fancy. And as the luck would have it, one of my Dunlop colleagues had joined that mobile company. And he knew that I had love and fascination for doing new things, which people sometimes are scared that it can spoil their career. That is where your risk-taking ability comes in. If you are scared that it can spoil your career if you don't succeed, you will perhaps take no risk. Joining mobile industry was a big risk. Imagine a mobile phone call used to be 50 cents a minute. If you talk for 2 minutes,
Extremely expensive.
it was $1 for 2 minutes. The incoming calls were also charged. So person who took the call from you, he also paid $1 for 2 minutes. Now, simple phone, which did not have any feature other than phone call, used to cost $1,500. We are talking 25 years ago. Joining that industry was risky. People knew you may succeed, may not succeed. The product may click, may not click. I had to run educational campaign to tell people why you should have a mobile phone. I think the excitement of something new caught me. That is the simple answer.
Yeah. And of course, it is exciting now, we all know, and you're absolutely right. I mean, like mobile is everywhere. But as you said, at the time, it was not everywhere. There was no infrastructure or little infrastructure. It cost a lot of money. I remember, I mean, like I waited a few years to buy a phone because I couldn't afford it. And of course, you had to compete with landlines. I mean, like people were just using landlines. So what is it then that made you know this is going to be really, really big? And why did you jump?
Some things are gut feel. A market research for a new product, and I'm repeating new product. People confuse new product with new brand. So when you already have 100 different soaps, another soap is not a new product, it is a new brand. A new product was mobile phone because no mobile phone existed. If you do a market survey, you will not get right answers. You have to go by your gut feel. With your permission, I will share one of the factors which helped me form my gut feel. My father had just retired and moved to new house, and he was waiting for telephone connection to be got. I could not call him because there was a waiting list of 10 years before you could get a telephone connection at that time in small towns. In bigger cities, you had to wait for 5 to 7 years. You put in your application. In 5 to 7 years, a public sector company which ran the telephone service will come to your house, somebody, and say, you are lucky, celebrate, distribute sweets, you get a phone connection now. I thought people who are waiting for 10 years, people who are waiting for 5 years for a phone connection, many of them can afford to pay $1,500 for a connection today instead of letting 10 years of their life pass without a phone. They can afford to pay $1 for 2 minutes instead of waiting 10 years for a cheap landline. That was a gut feel. There was no market survey and it worked. Sometimes risk taking comes with gut feel. One cannot downplay the importance of market surveys and quantified research. I'm not saying don't do. But there are times your personal judgment will play an important role, and one should be willing to take risk because with risk comes reward.
Yeah, that's a really important point, isn't it? With risk comes reward. Of course, you can't be sure about it. Now, you did actually build out one of the biggest networks in India, mobile networks, and you did so after Essar at Reliance. Reliance, one of those other giant Indian companies, where you also worked for almost 15 years, 10 to 15 years, and you build it from almost nothing to having, what is it, a few 100 million customers?
Yes.
Now that's great.
I mean, plus.
If you get to that stage, why would you want to leave a company like that? You're running an empire almost with that industry. So why did you then leave again after 10 years or 15 years the telecom industry?
The two companies where I was in the founding team, together they ended up having 200 million customers, Vodafone and Reliance. That is the adult population of Europe. Now, that was a satisfaction that you put that many phones in the hands of the people. But after a while, it is more of the same. Every month, I get 2 million, 3 million customers, new. So the number becomes from 90 million to 92 million, 92 million to 94 million. It's more of the same. The initial excitement when I launched the first prepaid in India, before that you used to have postpaid plans. When I launched the first text service, the SMS service in India, it was not very exciting. I just wrote test and my chief technical officer sent back a reply, okay. Not very exciting, but it was first text service. At that time, there was only Nokia phone with one line. It did not have a bigger display, so you could send only 60 characters. But initial excitement launching 3G, it gets over ultimately. And that is when I thought maybe something new before retiring. Because you realize that you have now that many years of career ahead and you must get to do something new. So what new was the challenge? Luck would have it. By sheer coincidence, I got invited to join Mahindra. And if I may say so, Decision making was easier because I had received my degree at Indian Institute of Management from Mr. Keshav Mahindra, who was chairman of Mahindra Group as well as chairman of the institute. And it was like coming full circle.
It's incredible, isn't it? You said this in passing, but so in 1981, when you graduated, you actually got the degree from Mr. Mahindra. And then, of course, being able and being asked, I suppose, by the new generation at Mahindra of the family to join that illustrious company must have been like, I don't know, maybe you call it going back to the future. So a new challenge ahead. And what was very
one
special,
of those which I say it was to be. That's all I would say. So I did not think much. Already I was thinking that something new, what can be new? It did not take long to decide because it was Mahindra,
right?
which was always close to the heart.
Now,
In Dunlop also, Mahindra was one of the largest customers of Dunlop.
huge company, and of course, it started right after the independence, I think, in cars, in manufacturing cars, and therefore that tie-in, as you said, with Dunlop with the tires, but it had grown to become a huge conglomerate spanning everything from holiday resorts to also IT services, of course, and everything in between. Now, when you go to a conglomerate like that, I mean, how can you make an impact? You joined at the group level, meaning that you look at the overall strategy. How are you able to make an impact, and where did you decide to focus your energy on?
So when you ask where, that's a very interesting question. Many of my younger colleagues, younger students, perhaps want to be in strategy. I finally got into strategy role when I had been president for 15 years already. But it was a strategy at group level. And the exciting thing about the group, and I'm very proud to say and delighted to say, that Mahindra is in 12 sectors, all distinct sectors, unique sectors. We are in manufacturing, we are in services, we are in India, we are outside India. We make, on one hand, trucks and boats. Between trucks and boats, we make cars and tractors and earth-moving machinery and two-wheelers. On the other hand, we run third largest holiday resort chain in the world. In India, we are largest in everything, so we have started global benchmarking. We are among the largest non-banking financial services companies. We are one of the largest IT companies. The exposure you get in the group office was tailor-made for me. Someone who is looking to do something new, something different, what can be better than sitting at group level and working with different companies of the group? So in the morning, you may be discussing tractors, and afternoon, you may be discussing IT. Where would you get such an exposure? That made my choice very easy.
Yeah, and of course the choice to go for strategy may be something that we all want to do. You said it. I mean, like when we're students, I'm interested in strategy. You said to me you can do this probably in the beginning of your career only if you choose to go in consulting. Probably that's the way you can do strategy, but otherwise it may be better to wait for later. Now, I want to ask you something very practical about this, because a major project that you undertook, and this is really, really big, was to change the logo of the entire Mahindra operations that was connected to everything. Why did you decide to take on that particular assignment, and how did you manage to do it? Because logos come with a lot of emotional baggage, I think, no?
You're right, absolutely. That came along 3 years after I had been with the group already. And a need was felt from our market research. The group strategy office did market research also as part of its activities. We had a logo which had remained since 1945, and it was very well respected company. Every market research showed that when people looked at our logo, they thought of Mahindra as a solid, reliable, trustworthy company, a warm company which will do good for the people. It was seen as a nationalistic company which grew from independence of India after the Second World War. All the positive things and all that impressions and opinions of the people, positive feelings about the people had been formed from our original businesses, which was tractors as well as automotive as well as steel. But we had gone into many new businesses since then. IT, one example, holiday resorts, another example. And we wanted a image makeover that how does our logo unit also reflect those attributes. And it was quite a gigantic exercise. Changing your logo is not easy. First of all, you have to do consensus building. And this is something I would like to mention. If a junior person in strategy office tried to do it, he will perhaps run into a lot of resistance. But when someone who has been president for 15 years tries to explain to people why we need a new logo, new brand unit, logo unit, which was, we call it word mark, people listen, they may have reservations, they may have concerns, and they say, well, why should I change? I have paid with this, a customer knows it, dealer knows it, government knows it. Why should I change? The resistance of change is natural, but that is why you need number of years behind you if you want your strategy to be taken seriously. It took me 1 year to build consensus, and then it took me 1 year to affect the change with the help of marketing directors of all the companies of the group. They had to work together with the approval of the CEOs of the companies. We created a brand architecture across the group, taking into account individual sensibilities of each business, each company. I'm very happy to say, looking back, that now it is 7 years and people have been very happy with the change. So what looked new at that time, looking back, now it is done thing. I'm sure 10 years later, somebody will say we need a refresh again. And
Yeah,
I will be watching from outside post-retirement and saying, yeah, time has come for what I did needs to be changed.
it's something that I've also now shared in the group in chat. If people want to see that logo, old and new, and it's really an exciting or an interesting thing to look at also. So I invite everyone to have a look at that old logo and that new logo, because you can really see what you say, which is that, you know, you can understand that people are very, very emotional and very attached to a logo. But you can also understand, if you look at the new logo, that perhaps it represents for some new brands, some new lines of business, much better what the company wants to be associated with, right? And in terms of IT, I believe that was very important for you.
You're right.
SP, you've already shared with us so much wisdom. We want to continue, and I also want to bring in some students to ask you some questions. In closing, as you now look back at, you know, this entire career that you've had so far, is there any advice that you'd like to share with students that are, of course, at the beginning of their careers as they look ahead and think about what they should do and where they should start?
Actually, I will take something which you said a few minutes back. I came from line role to staff role. Before that, I was in line role as a president. I was in staff role in Dunlop when I did product management. Then I went as a branch manager, regional manager. You know, region is like a country in India. I moved between staff and line role. That gives you both credibility as well as experience. I would encourage my younger friends, do not shy away either from staff role or from line role. Some people think sitting in office and making strategy is more prestigious. I do not know, because unless you have some gray hair, people don't take you that seriously. They say, well, he's telling me how to sell or how to manufacture. And on the other hand, some people in line role think that somebody in staff role knows nothing. That is also not correct. Staff role brings a perspective which a line role person may miss out.
Yeah.
I will encourage people to do a job rotation, alternate between staff and line. That will enrich your career and prepare you better. This will be my humble advice.
Yeah, and of course, sometimes that means that you go up in a company, and sometimes it means that you more sort of move sideways, so to speak, just to get various experiences and various perspectives within a company, and that allows you then, of course, to take the next step later on. SP, this is such a great advice. Now, I want to tie this in immediately with a question from Mohassin Patel, who's joining us from Munich, but who, like you, is a native of India and is doing his MBA in international business at EU. Mohassin, let's hear from you.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Mr. Shukla. It's
Hello,
our pleasure. It's our pleasure to have you here. And I heard your story, and it was really inspiring for a student like me to hear about your journey you had in your life. Also, the wordings that you said about your education, I really agree with that. And this is really, really good to hear such good ideas from you. And my question to you is that, let us say there is a leader who has adopted a democratic leadership style, and then he decides to change his leadership style from democratic to autocratic. So how can he ensure that when he does this transition, his team does not lose trust in him?
Thank you.
Mohsin, thank you for the kind words. But coming to your question, no democratic leader will become dictatorial, and no dictatorial leader will become overnight. I do not think Hitler could have become a great believer in democracy and vice versa. It does not work that way. First of all, this small point I would like to make. Organizations need to follow what is right for them at a point in time. When an aircraft is taking off, at that time, pilot makes the announcement, everybody fasten the seatbelt, no drinks will be served, no snacks will be served, and nobody will go to the washroom. Those 10 minutes, it can sound like dictatorship. Then you are in steady state and you can roam around. Or when the aircraft is descending, landing, once again, all the instructions come in place. An organization has to go through phases when you put down a definitive program and say everybody will stick to it. We need to do it for 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, sometimes 2 years, 3 years. And there are times when you are steady state, you're cruising at an altitude, plane is steady, no turbulence. One has to adapt to the circumstances and environment. It is not about personal attributes of a leader so much. However, companies will sometimes select a leader which suits that requirement of the environment. It is more to meet the requirement of the environment rather than personal preference of a leader. A leader does not go from being democratic to dictatorial. That does not happen.
Right.
Because people are what they are. I hope I have answered the question.
That's a very interesting answer. And, I get inspired by this. And I know, Mohassin, you've got sort of a follow-up question because, think about it. If you're in a big company, you typically need a different kind of leadership style than when you're in a startup. And that also affects, your ability, I think, to innovate. Mohassin, you had a question about that, right? About the interplay between hierarchy and innovation.
Yeah. Because let's say if we have a big company, so big companies usually have a very huge hierarchy. So in this huge hierarchy, it should not happen that somewhere the innovation gets lost. So my question was that, can a hierarchy in an organization act as an obstacle to innovation?
hierarchy is definitely an obstacle. I can tell you about Mahindra. We have actually innovation awards. We officially send out a communication in the beginning of the year, laying out a timetable that innovation entries will be invited. I was personally the chairman of Mahindra Innovation Academy for several years. We introduced Innovation Fair where all the innovations will be displayed on a large ground and people can see who did what, from IT to holiday resorts to carburetor of a tractor to car. Everything was on display, who did what. And we will give out awards in 4 categories and listen which are the categories. Fourth is the most interesting. Product award, where mostly it is engineering. Services award, where mostly marketing people come up with it. Business model award, new business model, very often marketing and finance teams put it together. But the fourth is the best award, and I used to take pride about this, failed innovation award. Idea was to take away stigma from failing in an innovation. The award was given on the basis of person saying, I failed, this innovation did not work. And what did I learn from this? Either in the idea about or its implementation or its acceptance. One who had the best learning from failure got that award. I actually spoke about it at World Economic Forum also. An ability of a society, an ability of an organization to take away stigma of failure will encourage people to take risk. Organizations which succeed are those which take away that stigma. The secret of Silicon Valley is there is no stigma in failure. There are people whose 2 projects have failed, 2 startups have failed, and they still get money for the 3rd startup. In any other country, if you fail twice, 3rd time nobody will give you money. Now that is what leads to risk taking. So yeah. I agree with you, there should be no hierarchy, and only way of cutting out that hierarchy is spread out open communication to 240,000 employees. Come here, bring your innovations.
Yes, and what I love is that idea of a failed innovation award, sort of just to celebrate not just success, but trying to come up with success, and it's okay if it doesn't work. Now, of course, all of us, many of us, want to know what is the next big thing in various industries, maybe in technology and in other industries as well. And for that, I want to bring in Carolina. I see already appearing. So, Carolina, tell us about your interest in this topic.
Hi, Mr. Shukla. It was a pleasure so far to hear you. So right now, there are a lot of students choosing their next steps in their career. As a company operating in multiple sectors as yours, what do you see as the next big thing in terms of growing industry or sector?
This question I have been asked, I don't know how many times. So allow me to say something over my long career. The answer I give to others, I'm going to give you the same answer. In last 38, 39 years, I have seen that the waves come which last for 5 to 7 years, and then they subside. When I became an engineer, at that time the wave was about chemical engineering because oil refineries were coming up all over the world. Next wave was of mechanical engineering because construction activity was going on. The third wave was electronics and telecommunication. That was the time it coincided with me setting up mobile infrastructure in the country. I think over $100 billion was spent in 5 years by all the companies put together. Then the wave came of bioengineering. Right now, the wave is on a very unique subject, which is data analytics. Every wave lasts only 5 to 7 years. If you start working at 24, 25, and you look forward to working till 65, we are talking about 40 years. In those 40 years, you will see at least 6 or 7 waves. What will be the next big thing for next 7 years will not be the next big thing for next 40 years. You cannot choose your career. You cannot decide your career based on what will work for next 7 years, because it will only work for next 7 years, and then you have to relearn. Look at me, from tire to telecom to now some people say tanks, because I'm in defense. Now, you have to be ready for the change. Don't accept change. Don't adopt change. Embrace change. Change is the only constant, and I say it at all forums. Therefore, how do you decide a career? Tell what your heart tells you, what you like doing. Only what you like doing, you will enjoy doing for next 40 years. Because if you took up something which is good for next 7 years, let us say big data, let us say data analytics, work from home has its own requirements for next few years. That will fade after 5-7 years, and you will be in a place which you joined because it was a good thing to do, but that may not be the best thing to do for next 40 years. So my suggestion will be, what you enjoy doing, take that subject, it will hold good for 40 years. These waves will come and go. But next wave, of course, is huge one. It is related to artificial intelligence, data analytics, more and more advances in communication. 3 of them coming together, creating a virtual reality.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that's true.
Eat virtual food. Ultimately, all these delivery startups, which you can order over internet, all those things only a delivery medium. Ultimately, good food is good food. That has to be cooked by somebody.
That's right.
There is no away from that.
But
I
look,
hope I have answered your question. I hope I did not disappoint you by not giving a prescription. I have given a description and not a prescription.
It's one of the best questions, replies I ever got for this question. Thank you very much.
And much more than that, I love that you also talked about data analytics and not so much put the focus on AI, artificial intelligence, which is probably more a marketing or a branding name than really describing what it is. Before we move on, I do want to ask one question from a student.
But Peter, your observation, I'll take only 2 lines. Number one of my favorite subjects when I have taught at leading business schools, my visiting faculty is end of market segmentation. Almost every segment you could find has been found.
Right.
It's a subject which I can speak for 1 hour, so I will not go here, but it's a fascinating subject.
Well, we'll take you up on the topic next time, and then we have a 2-hour session. Before we move on though, I do want to ask one question from Tushar Mathur, who says that he is making his thesis about the automobile industry in India. And so even though it may be only for 5 or 7 years, but he's asking, what is your thoughts on the electric vehicles? Is that maybe something that will last for 100 years? Because let's face it, automobiles, of course, have been around for 100 years. So
I agree with him. Electric vehicle is the future, no doubt about it. I think our Prime Minister a few years back had announced that we would ideally like electric vehicle to be the only vehicles on road in next 10 to 15 years. It may well come true in next 15 years. So there is no ambiguity about it. It is the future. Everything comes with its own constraint. Mahindra is the pioneer. We were the first company to make electric vehicles in India. In fact, I was one of the founding members of the Formula Racing for electric cars. So the way you have Formula One, similarly you have now Formula E, and Mahindra is a founding member. So I agree with this this question which has come. Electric vehicle will be the future. It will be a struggle the way mobile phone telephony was a struggle. Original mobile telephone companies in UK or Switzerland, elsewhere, you will find that they all struggled for several years before mobile phones became popular. I'm agreeing with electric vehicle by giving you an example of when automobiles were introduced on gasoline in US. You did not have petrol pumps, gasoline stations between New York and Connecticut. So people said an automobile is very good if you want to drive within New York or you want to drive within Connecticut. But if you want to go from New York to Connecticut, take a horse cart because horse can take water or make water on the way, which automobile can't because there were no fuel stations. Electric cars today face the problem of recharging, and that's the biggest concern. It's only a matter of time that the problem will be solved.
I love that historical perspective that you bring, which really makes us think of things in a little bit of a bigger picture, I would say. Now, one other question we got, SP, is from Romina Farrugia, and she's asking about the changes not in industries or the new innovations in products, but rather in us, in the way we work. She says now we're seeing a lot of companies going towards contract work, and a lot of workers are choosing to work in the gig economy, basically not taking a full-time contract, but doing things per hour or per job. What do you think of that trend? And do you think that has a place in the company of the future?
I did not get the name properly, so forgive me. Normally, I like to say the name and answer the question. First
Romina.
of all, when we talk about the jobs, there were no jobs till the Industrial Revolution. Everybody was an entrepreneur. He operated from home. Industrial Revolution happened in 1760s. Until then, a weaver operated from his house, a dyer who dyed the textile operated from his house, farmer produced his crop, took it personally to sell. Everybody, handicrafts people did their job, a locksmith, an ironsmith did his job. They were not employees of one another. Even the kings did not have a standing army. The nobles had their soldiers, and when king wanted, nobles provided soldiers, and they came with it. Jobs as a concept is only 200-year-old. Human civilization has lived without jobs for previous 5,000 years, is forgotten. Now we are reaching a stage where people are becoming entrepreneurs in their own right. I say that everybody is XYZ Private Limited.
Right.
It's Peter Private Limited. It's Carolina Private Limited. It's Luke Private Limited. We are all private limited individuals.
Yeah.
Earlier, you needed a place. Industrial Revolution made it possible for people to work in a factory. And somebody became an employer, others became employees. Otherwise, right, you provide a service and you get paid for it. We are seeing the transition where a large number of people are on contracts or short-term assignments, and they go from one assignment to another assignment. It is possible because, relatively speaking, the salaries on per hour basis, per day basis, and monthly basis are higher. So if you did not have an assignment between two jobs, you have enough to go by. And that is what is making it possible that one can actually take a break of few days between two jobs. So I agree with the comment. I agree with the analysis. We will see it happening more and more as the time passes by. It is not necessarily good or necessarily bad. It has its pros and cons.
Yeah.
You don't have assurance of a long-term steady job, but that is different from a career. You can have a long-term career moving from one job to another job. But I always make one point to people. Unless you spend long enough time in a company, you cannot make a difference. You cannot really bring about a change. You cannot do something lasting which people will remember. If you are there for a few months or few years, yes, it may be personally satisfying for you. But looking back, you will not be able to say, when I worked for that company, I was able to achieve this. That only happens when you stay long enough.
Yeah, and I think you are the living proof of that, SP. But of course, if we have to adapt to new ways of working, whether it is because of evolution in what a job looks like, or like now when there's COVID and we all have to work at home, it does raise the question about how to balance, I think, personal and professional life. So I want to bring in Thea as a last student to ask a question. And I think it's going to be about this. Thea from Georgia, who is right now in Barcelona, I think.
Hello, first of all, thank you for your time and really interesting speech. Yes, as Peter just mentioned, a lot of people now work from home and it became another office for a lot of people. So I would like to ask you, how do you balance your role as a leader with your personal life? And if it's easy to separate both worlds when you have an enormous amount of responsibility? And for example, how you manage to relax and enjoy your life with family and friends during the weekends? Thank you.
You asked many questions. I will try to answer. Each one deserves a separate answer. So first of all, it's a very important subject you have raised, and this is something everybody is grappling with. So am I. People like us who have operations in many countries, right now it's closer to 10:30 p.m. in India. So those who have inter-zone work, we have this difficulty. I have operations in Australia, Japan, which is 5 hours ahead of India. And I'm also director and chairman of companies in the Middle East and Europe, which is 3.5 hours behind. So besides my 9 hours work day in India, I have to cater for 5 hours this way and 3.5, 4 hours this way. So if you leave aside outliers, certain exceptions, I will not take mine as the best example because I can be on call at midnight and I can be on call at 6 in the morning. But that comes with the job. If we leave that aside and we talk about in normal course, how it is managed, the best thing to manage is to call it a day at certain time and let your colleagues know that at this time, we will not be taking phone calls. Emails are still taken because there may be something important, but phone calls stop after certain time. I can't very well do that. Second is about weekends. Now, my entire Middle East operation in UAE, Jordan, as well as Israel, where I have a lot of defense partners, many of these people have weekly off on a Friday or Saturday. And Sunday is a working day everywhere. So Sunday is their Monday. How can I say I will not work on your Monday? So in an increasingly globalized world, idea of weekend is becoming a challenge. I was chairman of Mahindra Racing for Formula Racing and motorcycle racing. And all the races happen on Saturday, Sundays. So every weekend I was actually occupied because there's a race going on, and till the time race is over, I'm actually glued to the TV screen and mobile in the hand. What's going on? What did happen? Why did the car skid? What happened? Did you not change the tire? It is great fun, you get involved. But if you enjoy your work, I'm quoting Confucius here. If you enjoy your work, you are no more in employment. You are actually having fun. But if you are thinking work is only to get you a paycheck, then of course you need to maintain work-life balance. Microsoft was not built by work-life balance. People operated from garage. Google was not built with work-life balance. People actually slept in the office. People did not go home on weekends. Amazon was not built with work-life balance. So I'm making clear distinction. There is no right and wrong. If you are building a company, a new idea, a new company, new business and a startup, work-life balance does not exist because you're working day and night to make it succeed. You are actually sleeping in office. You must have read the stories of all the big companies.
That's right.
People slept in the offices. I have slept in the office while setting up mobile companies, 2 of them. But once it is steady state, you try to bring work-life balance for everybody, starting with yourself.
And SP.
Now, I stop there because I think one can go on this subject. I hope I have answered your question. The best way is declare to people beyond what time you will not want a call and you will ideally not be replying emails. That is the best way of bringing about work-life balance.
And it's true, SP, you know, you live these values because we are meeting here today because you told us that you have an important family event in the next few weeks that you're expecting. And so you kindly asked us, you know, I want to be there for that. So could we take that into account? So you really live those values. SP, we have learned so much during this hour. And I think next time we ask you, first, we're going to ask you to meet in person so we can share the physical space and see you for real. And secondly, of course, we will make sure that we have some more time because I think we could have kept on talking a very long time and learn a lot from you. So I want to thank you all on behalf of everyone already for the time you've spent with us. You've really inspired us. And I want to give the last word now to Luc, of course, for the closing. But thank you, SP.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Delighted to be here. I wish all the students and the faculty the very best going forward. Look forward to seeing you sometime in person.
Yes, Mr. Shukla, thank you very much. I think it has been an inspiring talk for all of our students. Stay close to your values, stay close to your passion. I think that's what I will always remember from this talk. It has been, your humility should be shared with all of our listeners. And thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
It has been,
I'm grateful for being invited, and thank you for all the kind words.
It has been a good hour spent with our community. Now, next for us is already in 2 weeks' time, on the 10th of December. We will have our last Learning from Leaders speaker from before Christmas. It will be the chairman of Nestlé, Mr. Paul Bulke, that will be joining us. In the meantime, thank you very much. Good night, Mr. Shukla, because I understand that it's quite late already in India. And embrace the evening, everybody. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Good night, and thank you so much. Bye-bye. Thank you, Peter. Bye-bye.